Today, as last week, we continue to hear the Cliff Note version of Jesus' ministry, which Mark presents to his church. Mark's gospel is a good one for our times because it's almost like bullet points without the elaboration you find in Matthew, Luke, and especially in the Gospel of John, those three taking their cue from Mark. He is writing to a church that is stressed out, that faces a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, and abuse from those around them. It is hard to be a Christian, and it is lonely. You dwell in a wilderness as a Christian, and it is a church community which is faced with rethinking its expectations. By this time, when Mark writes down his gospel, the first gospel to be written down, Christians thought Jesus should have come again with power and great glory, kind of like the cavalry that comes at the end of a Western movie, right at the last minute to rescue the people. Where is he? Life has gone from bad to worse. Is he ever going to come back? What have we done to deserve this? We have been abandoned. Hope is fading. And so Mark writes his gospel to bring back hope and to reframe Jesus' life for these new times. With the new lenses of this wilderness and stressed out time, Mark takes a second look at Jesus and his life and ministry. And rather than lingering over those lengthy stories and episodes as come later, Mark discovers a spiritual journey involving constant movement, punctuated by short times in which Jesus rises in the pre-dawn darkness and goes out to a lonely or deserted place to pray and listen, and then find out of that lonely place a whole new direction and new possibility. Using terms sparingly, the word that Mark chooses for this kind of lonely or deserted place is eremos, a multifaceted Greek term that combines loneliness, dryness, and especially abandonment. The word eremos can be applied to places to describe those deserted and lonely places where there is only the sound of the wind sweeping across an empty landscape. The word eremos can also be applied to persons or flocks who have been abandoned, deprived of affection, care, and protection. As the writer of Psalm 88 laments, "My friend and my neighbor you have put away from me, and darkness is my only companion." That writer of that psalm was in eremos, a lonely place. But the interesting thing is, he turns that lonely, abandoned place into a place of prayer and listening. And out of prayer and listening comes a new direction. I recall being in such a lonely place when I was in college. Some of you may be familiar with this story. I keep coming back to it because it is such a pivotal point in my life. And like Mark rethinking Jesus and his ministry, so I must always rethink the events of my own life. So I'm in college. I'm going through one of those hopeless, lonely times which frequently punctuate our adolescent crises. As I look back, it seems a bit trivial and first world, but at the time, it was really big for me. And I'm reminded in this day and time how adolescent lives are lost because they are ill-equipped to go through such times. And this moment was so big, I remember every detail of that day. You know, those big moments where we remember those strange details. It is the beginning of my junior year at William and Mary. I'm lying in my bed, sleepless in the middle of the night, despairing. I can hear my roommate John snoring softly across the dorm room in Tyler Hall. I do not want John to be my roommate. I can't stand him. But my best friend and former roommate, in order to advance his progress toward the Methodist ordination, has abandoned me and is now in the Methodist student house. The night is warm, the fan in the window by my bed is buzzing, and it's Saturday night, and I am totally and utterly depressed and hopeless. Seems like everyone else has a girlfriend but me. You know, remember those times, guys, or boyfriend if you're a woman. And as I am lying there, a thought arises in my mind. And I think it is a thought and a possibility that was planted there by years and years and years of growing up in the church and coming to know beautiful and prayerful and loving people. So, feeling rather doubtful and a bit silly, with no other recourse, I pray something like this. Lord, if you are there, big if, I don't know what to do. I feel all alone. I don't want to wake up in the morning. I need your help and your guidance. It is one of those moments of absolute self-honesty and turning it over. The interesting thing is I've hardly finished that prayer when my mind begins to wander sleepily, and the image of the Canterbury Sunday dinner comes to mind. Remember that Canterbury Sunday dinner? Some of you have heard this story before. I had been a few times in my freshman year. I thought they were all dorks. But in reality, I felt like I didn't belong and I didn't fit into such a tight group and never went back. They were too holy. But this time I think, what do I have to lose? There's nothing else. So I go to the meeting the next evening, their opening dinner and discussion. I wind up being invited to join them on a retreat the next weekend, and this time I'm ready. The silence of that lonely place of abandonment has opened my ears and my heart to the possibility that there is something deeper and more. And this is the beginning of Jesus and his love and guidance becoming real for me, becoming incarnate, taking flesh in a very personal way. If I were an evangelical, dare I say it, in an Episcopal church, it was when I began to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That is the beginning of God's reshaping my life from the inside out and of my life going into an entirely new direction, leading me through many other lonely places, chosen and unchosen, to this place and time and pulpit. Well, in the pre-dawn darkness, Jesus also seeks out the lonely place or finds himself there. Mark says people had crowded around him, clamoring to touch and be touched by him. And he had been healing them late into the night. And we know from another another healing story that when Jesus healed, power went out from him, energy went out from him. Healing demanded something from him. We forget about that. Emotional labor. Jesus could get drained. I wonder whether he might have found himself in that lonely place because he had had a sleepless night, just as I had in my dorm room so many years ago, and finally he threw up his hands and got up, as we do sometimes when we can't sleep, and he goes off into the silence of the wilderness. But that lonely place opened him up to the voice of his Father, and he realized that he was being called to a new journey, a larger mission. And so when his disciples find him and say, "Everyone is searching for you, get out there, you got a lot more to heal," he answered, "I'm done. I can't get stuck there. Let's go to the neighboring towns so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." Not a popular decision. You know, he probably got 1 star on the Google evaluation because he's a selfish man and he left all those people who needed healing. But he listened and he prayed. In preparing his gospel to give faith and hope to his lonely church, Mark makes a discovery. Every shift in Jesus' sense of identity and mission comes from prayer in those lonely places. They become the transition points, the setting for new vision, a leaving behind of the old and a facing of the new and life-giving directions. And so it is for us as it is for Jesus. Our life of faith is built on the foundation stones of those lonely places rather than those successes. Chosen or unchosen, the lonely places of a silent retreat or pre-dawn prayer or sleepless nights, the lonely places of loss and pain and illness, of confusion and fear. When prayer rises in us in those moments, as much out of desperation as out of faith, the faithful Lord finds an opening through which he calls us forth and shapes new possibilities in us. And we find the power to leave behind the old, to embrace the new path that is before us. Amen.